Ryan, you've got a matter you'd like to address before we go to this case?
Yes, Your Honor. Defense counsel and I have reached a stipulation with respect to chain of custody. Stephen Peralt, the witness who just testified, the stipulation involves the fact that we stipulate he seized the evidence that he discussed, that is the burned clothing on each side of the road. He packaged it, he submitted it to the evidence locker, and thereafter it went to the Connecticut Forensic Lab for testing.
All right, so stipulated, thank you. All right, and at this point, please stand for the next witness.
State calls Lisa Ragazza to the stand.
Please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or solemnly sincerely affirm as the case may be that the evidence you shall give concerning this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God or upon penalty of perjury.
I do.
Would you please state your name, spelling your last name, and then your business address for the record?
Lisa Ragazza, Ragaza, 278 Colony Street in Meriden, Connecticut.
Please proceed, please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Excuse me. Yes, the witness, I had a brief conversation with in the jury room, because I thought she was a lawyer. Nothing of substance, but I just wanted to. All right.
Ms. Ragazza, how are you currently employed?
I work for the state of Connecticut in the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection in the Division of Scientific Services, which is the Forensic Science Laboratory.
And what position do you hold there?
I'm a forensic science examiner. I work in the question documents and imprints unit of the laboratory.
What's imprints unit? What is the imprints unit?
Imprints is any type of patterned object that makes an impression at a crime scene. It's usually footwear and tire tracks.
And what has been your educational background and training prior to you coming to the lab, and any additional training that you may have had subsequent to being at the lab?
Sure.
In both of you.
Okay. I have a bachelor's degree in archaeology and geological sciences from Tufts University. I have a master's degree in forensic science from the University of New Haven. I obtained my current position in 2010, and I received internal training at the laboratory, as well as I attended a one-week class through the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And then I was part of a 9-month training program through the National Institute of Justice. In this training program, we had 5 weeks of classroom activity. The first one was on footwear and tire track comparison. The first one was on footwear comparison. The second one was on tire track comparison. We had another week on documentation and collection of evidence, footwear and tire track evidence. We had a week of just doing casework. And then we had a week of courtroom testimony. And in the meantime, during those 9 months, we had homework assignments. We had to read books, articles. We had to prepare a paper, as well as other essays. We had a practical casework example of a footwear case that was sent to us that we had to do. And in addition to this training program, I've gone to several conferences through the International Association of Identification, which is a professional organization for footwear and tire track examiners, latent print examiners, and crime scene technicians.
Approximately how many cases would you say you have conducted imprint examinations in?
At this point, probably around 100.
And have you testified in court before regarding imprint examinations?
Yes, I have.
Have you been declared an expert in imprint examinations?
Yes,
Did you provide your resume for today's proceeding?
I did.
Vergazza, showing you what's been marked States Exhibit 33 for ID, is that your resume?
Yes, it is.
I'd offer that as a full exhibit at this point.
No check.
The marks of full exhibit, States 33.
And Your Honor, I would ask at this point that you, Ms. Vergazza, be declared an expert in imprint examination.
Go ahead and ask your questions, and
Pardon?
you can go ahead and ask your questions.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Vergazza, did you, in your position in imprints at the forensic lab, come into evidence from the Western District Major Crime Squad related to an incident that occurred, or actually two incidents that occurred in August of 2012, specifically under case numbers 12-1268 and 12-1240?
Yes, I did.
And were the items of evidence that you obtained in relation to those two cases, in the first instance, burned clothing, specifically burned footwear, and in the second instance, a disc of crime scene photos that identified footwear pattern transfers at the crime scene in blood-like substance?
Yes,
And based upon your receipt of those two different articles of evidence, did you then make a comparison between them such that you came to a forensic conclusion?
yes, I did.
And did you prepare a PowerPoint to better explain your method of coming to that conclusion so that to assist the jury?
Yes, I did.
May I have just a moment?
Yes.
Sure.
Your Honor, I would offer the PowerPoint as a full exhibit. I have a printed out version in black and white so that we can mark that. However, I'd like to be able to substitute a color version of it as the exhibit that would go to the jury.
You can make the offer, and we'll see.
So let's mark this
We'll see what
now as State's Exhibit 34 for ID. And Ms. Vergazza, showing you what's been marked State's Exhibit 34 for ID, is that just a printed version of the PowerPoint that you intend to go through for the jury?
Yes, sir.
And that, other than the fact that it's in black and white, that's an exact depiction of the screen, so we'll be seeing,
Yes, sir.
I would offer this.
No objection.
The remarks of full exhibit, States 34.
Your Honor, at this time, may the witness be positioned in such a way that she can manipulate the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Gaza, when you're responding to questions, just be sure you keep your voice up so that all the jurors can hear it.
Laptop. Now, ma'am, if you could just begin with your first slide.
Sure, this is just a title screen for footwear print evidence. So So I received a submission of photographs from the scene of footwear, imprints, and a blood-like substance at a crime scene. And so I went through the photographs that were sent to me on the CD, and I identified photographs of 8 different imprints that were of examination quality. And by examination quality photographs, essentially what that is a photograph of an imprint with a scale. And the photograph is taken in such a way that the scale is positioned so that the photograph can be printed or brought back to natural size. And so what natural size is that 1 inch on the ruler is 1 inch printed on the printed ruler in the picture. So what happens is that the ruler, the size of the ruler is correct, and that makes the size of the imprint correct. So I'm able to get the actual size of the imprint from the scene. And so in examining imprints from a crime scene, we follow this process called ASPE, and that's analysis, comparison, evaluation, and verification. So the analysis portion is going through the question imprints at the scene, taking a look and seeing what I have there, how many I have, and which ones I can compare. And then the comparison, and I do the same thing with the shoes. So going through the shoes that I received, examining those shoes and performing an analysis on those shoes. And then comparing the imprints to the shoes is a comparison process. And then the evaluation process is coming up with the opinion based on what I see in the analysis and the comparison, what is the opinion that I'm going to come to. And then verification is we have a laboratory technical reviewer. And the technical reviewer will go through the material as well and come to the same conclusion, and then and then a report will be issued. If there's any discrepancy in our conclusions, then we would have to sit down and discuss them. In this case, there wasn't any discrepancy, so there was no additional conversation that occurred. So this is what I labeled in my case file as imprint number 1. Imprint number 1 is an imprint in a blood-like substance. It is made by a right shoe, and the design, what we call the outsole design, which is essentially the design on the bottom of the shoe, consists of 2 target-like areas. The one in the ball area, which is the top portion of the shoe where the ball of the foot would be, has curved bars around it. And then in the heel, there's another area where there's a circular area with more curved bars. And then along the edges are short bars. And this is consistent with a Nike outsole.
Would it be helpful so that you could point out those areas to the jury? I think we have a pointer. And if I get out of the way, you might, oh, I thought this was a laser pointer. Oh, we have the laser pointer. No, we may not have that. But, Your Honor, may the witness just rise and point out the different areas that she's just described as comparable. So you had described those areas that were appropriate for comparison, and you described different parts of what appeared to be the shoe. You can stand over here, and that way Attorney Santos can see.
Okay, so this is what I call the ball area. So we have this circular area right here, and then these curved bars that go around that area. And then in the heel, there's another circular area here with additional curved bars that surround that. And then there's also these short bars that go around the edge of the shoe.
And by the way, can you, are you able to determine the size of the footprint, that is, the shoe size, just from what you do? And why is that?
We don't look at the shoe size. What we compare, we call physical size. So we're comparing the physical size of the shoe with the physical size of the imprint. So, 1 millimeter on the shoe is 1 millimeter in the imprint. 12 inches is 12 inches. We don't try to determine shoe size. And part of the problem is there's so many different types of shoes that in order to do shoe size, you would really need to contact the manufacturer and get samples of the shoe from the manufacturer. And in this case, we didn't do that.
Okay, so this is your next slide, and is this yet another imprint that you, or print that you felt was appropriate for comparison?
Yes, I did. Again, this is an examination quality photograph. And it is, this imprint, which I labeled imprint number 2, is also made by a right shoe. And the design of the imprint is similar to that of imprint 1. And if you notice, this is actually,
Is this on your screen up there? Maybe if
Yes.
the witness wants to sit here, I could go to the, to our table.
But she's going to manipulate the laptop anyway.
Oh, okay. I'll stay here.
Okay.
I'm not sure what it's on the screen.
Oh, it bounces.
So this right here is imprints 3 and 4. And these two imprints were both made by a right shoe and again share the same outsole design.
And can you explain, please, so that would be two different transfer pattern transfers that are overlapping one another, is that fair to
That's
say? Okay.
In this photograph, I have 3 imprints that are labeled imprints 5, 6, and 7. Imprint 5 was made by a right shoe. Imprint 6 was made by a left shoe. And again, imprint 6 and imprint 5 overlap each other. And then imprint 7 was also made by a left shoe.
And could you just designate the orientation of the shoes over one another again, if you don't mind this standing? Is it, is it such a way like this, or are you able to tell that?
I am not positive which one is unhappy.
Okay, all right. But there are essentially multiple pattern transfers that overlap one another in this photo.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then imprint number 8 was made by a left shoe and contains the same outsole design as the other imprints. And then this is submission number 1 that I received. It's part of a right shoe. This is a photograph of the entire contents that was in submission 1. So there's 3 pieces of the shoe. There's what appears to be a remnant of a sock. And that tin container contained debris from another unit of the laboratory that had examined the shoe. This is a photograph of what I had from submission 1, the right shoe. And then this slide is the outsole of the right shoe. So this is what remained of the right shoe and the outsole of the shoe. There's an area of the top of the shoe where the toe would be, the ball area. And then there's a portion of the shoe where the arch of the foot would be, the arch area.
And by outsole, what do you mean by that?
The outsole is essentially the bottom of the shoe, the sole, the shoe sole.
And so on this screen, it's a picture to the right, that's the area that's under your toe
Right.
area, and the left would be the one that you talked about, came under your heel.
That's, and then this was the left shoe. This is what remained of the left shoe. The slide on the photograph on the left is the top part of the shoe, and then the photograph on the right is the bottom of the shoe where the outsole would be, but there's nothing there for comparison purposes. So just to go a little bit over imprint comparison, we talked about class characteristics. So class characteristics are characteristics that are shared by a group. And in footwear examination, we look at the outsole design, which is essentially the design of the outsole, the bottom of the shoe, what it looks like, what the elements are. We look at the physical size, which is the actual size of the shoe compared to the actual size of the imprint. We don't look at shoe size. And then physical shape, which for footwear means left or right shoe. And then we have characteristics from wear. So as you wear your shoes and you use your shoes, elements of the design will start to wear away. And so we look at that to see if the wear characteristics are similar or different to the shoes, because that can help us in our comparison. It can also help us with elimination. So we look at the characteristics from wear. And then we look at individual characteristics. So as you continue to wear your shoes, you develop either damage or temporary characteristics. So damage would be damage to the outsole. So you could have scratches or cuts or nicks or pieces like chunks missing, gouges. And then temporary characteristics would be things embedded in the shoe, like a rock or a nail or some gum stuck to it or a sticker. Things like that could be present in the shoe as well. So what I do with the shoes is I make test impressions. And to make test impressions, we either put ink or fingerprint powder on the bottom of the shoe, and then we take that shoe and we press the outsole into a sticky, clear sheet of paper, essentially. And it's clear, like a transparency. So what happens is that ink and that, or that powder will adhere to the transparency paper, and then we'll cover it with another sheet on top. And normally I only make 2 test impressions of the shoes, but in this instance, due to the condition of the shoes, there was a lot of soot and debris that was present. So that was adhering as well. So I made multiple test impressions. And the reason for that is you want to be able to obtain as much information about the shoe as you can. So making more test impressions in this instance was better to make sure I got everything that I needed to look at.
And so just in this particular screen, the areas that are more completely dark, is that the soot
Yes.
that you notice on the bottom of the board?
That would be the soot that was in the bottom. And normally what happens is the more you take, the less soot is present on the shoe because it's already adhered to another test impression. So we get clearer test impressions. Just to explain wear characteristics a little bit better, here's the toe area of the shoe, or the ball area of the shoe. And in these areas of these curved bars, if you notice along the edges, there's these little lines that are present. And that's texture that comes from the mold when the shoe's made. And so the areas that in the middle where there's no texture is because that texture has been worn away as the shoe is worn. And then the same thing here in the top part of the shoe. You see that where there's what we call stars. It's part of the design. There's these little stars along the edge. And they normally continue throughout that entire area, but they're also gone in this shoe.
So
And that's the wear.
your comparison is really quite microscopic when you're looking at things. You're looking for the tiniest of details in order to make these comparisons.
That's correct. And then some of the individual characteristics that I noticed. This is a test impression of the arch area. And then the second photograph with the circled areas enlarged are some of the things that I noticed. So in the one on the top, there's an area where there's a part where it breaks and it's not continuous. And what I do is when I see individual characteristics like this, I check to see if they're repeatable. So I look at all my test impressions to see if it repeats itself. And then I also look at the shoe to make sure there's actual damage to that shoe in the area that the individual characteristic is appearing, to make sure there's actually something on the shoe. And then in this area, there was a part of it that was worn away and depressed a little, and it was creating this break. The second one is an area where it sort of dips down and curves. The line isn't straight. In that area on the shoe, there was some damage to the side of that curved bar and that sign, and that represented itself as a curved area right there. And then the one on the bottom, there's an area right there where there's also a break, and in the shoe, there was a little chunk of the outsole missing. So this is in the arch area. And then in the ball area of the shoe, I also noticed individual characteristics, and those are all circled. And again, I compared these to the actual ball area of the shoe that I had to make sure there was an individual characteristic present.
And could you just talk about these? The one farthest on the top to the left, is it that little tail that's sticking off of the tread that's the...
Right, part of the bar is worn away and the little tail is sticking off. And also right next to it, there's a little piece missing, a little sort of pointed triangular piece that's kind of gouged out of that area.
And then underneath it is the area of an individual characteristic, that area that appears lighter in the middle.
Yes, correct, and that's worn away.
And then down the third circled item on the left there, what's the individual characteristic that you noted there?
There's an area where the top of that element, where it should be rectangular, is actually curved down or dips down like a U or a V. So it's missing a little bit of it.
And I mean, when the layperson looks at this, we may see areas that appear to be irregular, but the value to you is that you then double check, you double check with the different imprints that you have made in the shoe itself, and then look at the actual item and compare to make sure, and that's where you get these individual characteristics. This being of some significance. Is that fair to say? Okay. With respect to the others, could you just briefly talk about what the other individual characteristics are that you circled there?
Sure, the one on the right there, the top
Right there?
one, yes. There's an area there where there's actually a bit of a scratch through there. The one down to the left, there's an area where part of it is depressed in that area of the shoe, and so it's not contacting when I'm making the test impression, so it's kind of like a circular area where there's information missing, there's nothing contacting there. And then the other two are both breaks in
So
the bar.
we can see the line, and then there's a break in it, and then it continues on.
Right.
Okay.
And the same thing with the two on the test impression. In both of those areas, there's a break. So the bar continues and then stops, there's a break, and then it continues again. So in performing the comparison, I looked at all the 8 imprints that I had examination quality photographs of. And I did a comparison of size and design by overlaying my test impressions on top of the photographs that I had printed. And the size compared, the outsole design compared, and the wear characteristics compared.
And when you say they compared, what does that mean?
That means that they were consistent. So then I started looking at individual characteristics. And in this particular area of this imprint number 1, this area over here in the arch area towards
that-
the heel,
So is that the one all the way to the right or all the way to the left?
all the way to the left, that's
The one that you have the arrow?
the one that I have the arrow pointing at.
Okay.
So that area in the question imprint, the seam, in the blood-like substance, has this area where it's broken. And that was consistent with this area on the shoe. And then in the ball area of the shoe, those 2 breaks that I had also seen in the shoe were consistent in, I look at size, shape, location of the individual characteristics, and they were consistent with the question imprint at this. And then imprint 2 again was made by a right shoe, and that was consistent in outsole design and physical size and physical shape with the portions of the right shoe that I had. And again, I looked at some individual characteristics, and again, I saw that break. With this imprint, there's actually multiple imprints in that arch/heel area. I don't know if you can see, they're on top of each other.
So we're talking about here on the left where there appear to be more than one. It almost looks like they're overlaid on one another.
That's correct.
Okay.
So in that particular area, there's 2 areas where that individual characteristic appears. And then in the ball area of the shoe, 3 individual characteristics appeared that I had seen. One of them was that area of the bar where that short bar where part of the side of it is broken and damaged, and so it appears sort of like a U shape or a V shape. And then the other 2, one of them, the one in the middle of that, in that curved bar, in the middle of that curved bar, there is damage that occurred, so the outsole was missing. There was some areas that did not contact when I made the test impression. We did the same thing in this question imprint. And then the other one that is circled to the right is that area where the curved bar is sort of protruding out a little bit longer. And then there's also a little V-shaped area that's of damage that's missing from that area. And then imprints 3 and 4. Imprint 3 was of a right shoe. It was consistent in outsole design and physical size with the portions of the right shoe that I had. And I did not find any individual characteristics in imprint 3. Imprint 4 was also consistent in physical size and outsole design with the portion of the right shoe that I had. And in imprint 4, I found a few individual characteristics as well. There's one area where there's a break in the bar on the left, and that's consistent with the test impressions that I made. There's also an area where there's damage in the middle of the bar, and that's consistent with the test impressions I made. And then the one to the right is an area where there is a scratch running through there, and that was consistent. Imprint 5 is the one in the middle that is made by a right shoe. And imprint number 5 was consistent in outsole design and physical size with the portions of the right shoe that I had. And again, I found individual characteristics. So in the arch area of the shoe, there were 2 bars that had damage to them, or there were breaks, and those were consistent in the arch area of the questioned imprint. And then imprints 6 and 7 were made by a left shoe, and I did not have any portion of the left shoe from submission number 2 to the laboratory that I could compare due to the damage to the shoe.
And did the damage to the right shoe that you obtained as evidence, did that affect your ability to further compare? I mean, if you had a shoe that was whole, it would be an easier job, right?
That's correct.
Okay, why is that?
We would have the full length of the shoe. It wouldn't be damaged in the sense that the shoe was broken up into pieces. The debris that was present on the shoe, all that soot, interfered in the test impressions, the making of the test impressions. Normally shoes are much cleaner and easier to work with. But the damage to the shoe, I didn't see any damage that would have affected any of the individual characteristics or class characteristics or wear present on the shoe, the portions of the shoe that I had. And then imprint number 8 was made by a left shoe as well. So my conclusions in this case was that imprints 1, 2, 4, and 5 were probably made by the known right shoe in submission 1. And then imprint 3 could have been made by the known right shoe in submission 1. And imprint 6, 7, and 8 were made by a left shoe and cannot be compared to submission 2 due to the condition of the shoe.
Now, when you tell the jury, when you're making, when you're coming to a conclusion, what are the types of conclusion that you can actually come to as an imprint examiner?
Sure. We could identify the shoe, have an identification and say this shoe made this imprint. And that would be an association of all the past characteristics as well as